Welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready because we are fundamentally going to change how you view your own mind, and honestly, the behavior of literally everyone around you. We're going straight back to the absolute foundations here to answer a seemingly simple question: what is psychology? And look, this isn't just some dry academic theory. We are talking about decoding the actual operating system of your life.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I've got a question for you. Are you already a psychologist? Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, no, I don't exactly have a PhD on my wall. But the truth is, we all kind of act like lay psychologists every single day. Think about it. We are constantly observing people, trying to figure out why they do the things they do, and we're always coming up with our own ready-made explanations, right? Like, if a coworker is slacking off, you might just instantly theorize, oh, they're inherently lazy, they just need a push. We all have these personal theories of human behavior constantly running in the background. But here's the catch. Does observing behavior every day actually mean we understand the real underlying science of it?
Let's actually put those everyday theories to the test. Let's look at two incredibly common proverbs. Imagine a really good friend of yours moves far away. What happens to that relationship? Well, if you guys end up drifting apart and you start hanging out with new people, you'll probably nod your head wisely and say, yep, out of sight, out of mind. But what if you don't find new friends? What if you just sit around missing them deeply every day? Then you'll inevitably say, distance makes the heart grow fonder. Do you see the trap here? Everyday common sense literally gives us two completely contradictory explanations for the exact same human behavior.
And that brings us to this massive, mind-blowing realization. Common sense is essentially just hindsight. It is entirely reliant on looking backward. The explanation you choose to go with completely depends on what happens after the event has already occurred. It's basically Monday morning quarterbacking. It explains very little, and it definitely doesn't predict anything. But true psychology? Psychology is a hard science. It doesn't settle for that kind of after-the-fact storytelling. It is actively looking for verifiable patterns of behavior that can be reliably predicted before they ever happen.
So, to understand how we actually get to those solid predictions, we kind of have to look at where this whole discipline began. The word psychology originally comes from two Greek words. You've got psyche, which translates to soul, and logos, which means science or study. So, centuries ago, this whole thing kicked off as a branch of philosophy dedicated to studying the human soul. But, as you can probably guess, it's pretty darn difficult to put a soul under a microscope. So, to become a true verifiable science, the field had to evolve massively from those ancient philosophical roots. And what's truly wild here is just how far we've come from just pondering the soul. Fast forward to today, and psychology is formally defined as a rigorous science. It systematically studies mental processes, human experiences, and behavior in all sorts of different contexts. It is absolutely not about guessing anymore, it's about systematically gathering hard data. Actually, for a really long time, the whole concept of the mind was viewed as sort of taboo in science simply because you couldn't physically locate it in the body. But today, thanks to massive advances by neuroscientists and physicists, the study of our internal mental processes, exactly how we think, how we remember, how we solve complex problems, is totally back at the forefront. And it's backed by incredibly rigorous data.
So you might be wondering, how exactly does psychology gather all this rigorous data? Well, it uses the exact same framework as the natural sciences like physics or biology. It's something called the hypothetico-deductive model. Let's just walk through this loop together. It's basically a giant puzzle. First up, you start with a theory. This is just a broad set of statements trying to explain a complex phenomenon. Based on that theory, you deduce a hypothesis, a really specific, tentative prediction. Then comes the absolute most crucial part. You gather empirical data. You run tests to see if that hypothesis is actually true or false in the real world. And finally, you revise the theory if the data points in a completely different direction. It's this relentless, rigorous loop of testing and refinement.
Let's look at a really fascinating real-world example of this scientific method in action. Back in 1975, a researcher named Carol Dweck encountered a real problem. She noticed that children were giving up way too easily when they faced difficult math problems or when they experienced failure. She wanted to figure out how to help them build resilience. Now, if we rely on common sense, the answer seems super obvious, right? Just give the kids easy problems first, let them get some quick wins, boost their confidence up, and then hit them with the hard stuff. But Dweck didn't just trust common sense. She formulated a hypothesis, and she actually put it to the test. She sets up this brilliant experiment, taking two groups of students through 25 days of math training. Group 1, they only received easy problems. They were literally always successful, building up all that common sense confidence. Group 2, on the other hand, received a mix of easy problems and incredibly difficult problems. Now, when Group 2 inevitably hit a wall and failed the hard problems, Dweck stepped in. She told them, hey, Your failure isn't because you aren't smart enough. It's simply because you haven't tried hard enough yet. She explicitly taught them to attribute their failure to a lack of effort, not a lack of innate ability. So after the 25 days were up, she gave both groups a brand new set of really difficult problems just to see what would happen.
And guys, the climax of this study completely shattered our everyday assumptions. The empirical data showed that Group 1, the students who had been fed a steady diet of nothing but easy successes and high confidence, they actually gave up way faster when they finally faced a real failure. Shielding them from struggle literally made them less resilient. Meanwhile, Group 2, the kids who had been taught to handle failure and just attribute it to effort, they pushed through and persisted. This brilliantly proves exactly why we cannot just rely on what feels right when it comes to human behavior. We absolutely have to test it. And honestly, Dweck's study, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Psychology is constantly busting these widespread cultural myths using hard, empirical data. For instance, it wasn't that long ago that certain societies genuinely believed men were just inherently more intelligent than women, or that women caused way more traffic accidents. Guess what? Empirical data completely undeniably proved both of those assumptions completely untrue. Or, oh, how about this one? The idea that having to perform in front of a giant audience will automatically ruin your performance because of nerves. Science actually shows that if you are highly practiced at a task, the presence of an audience will literally enhance your performance. It is data over assumptions every single time.
But look, why does this matter to you and me? This isn't just about busting myths in some sterile laboratory. The structured knowledge generated by psychology is incredibly directly practical for you. By understanding the real empirical principles of behavior and cognition, you can optimize your own life. You can use this science to develop highly effective study and memory habits. You can navigate all those complex interpersonal problems at work or at home. You can make way sharper, more informed decisions. You can even use specific strategies to successfully alleviate the physical and mental stress of a major exam. Psychology is literally a toolkit for daily living.
And I think that beautifully brings us to the core message of our explainer today. Studying psychology isn't just about sitting in a classroom memorizing old theories. It is a thrilling, scientific expedition. As the author Norman Cousins so perfectly put it, the growth of the human mind is still high adventure, in many ways, the highest adventure on Earth. By studying psychology, we are actively mapping the most complex, most fascinating territory known to exist, our very own consciousness and behavior. We've covered a ton of ground today, right? Moving all the way from the ancient philosophical study of the soul straight into the rigorous, data-driven science that protects us from the traps of hindsight and contradictory proverbs. So, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Now that you know everyday common sense is so often just a comforting illusion created after the fact, how are you going to analyze the very next major decision you make? Are you going to rely on a hunch? Or are you going to start thinking like a true psychological scientist? Keep questioning everything, keep observing, and thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer.